Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Attorney Danyl Patterson, candidate for the 190th state rep seat. For those of you who don't know, that's West Philly, baby. We're continuing to come to you every day at 3:30 for legal lessons for life. And today I'm going to be joined by the eloquent Tariq El-Shabazz because we're going to talk about what's going on in criminal law in the courts during this COVID crisis. Tariq, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Can I know you've been on the show before, but can for those, three people who are tuning in that don't know, because everybody knows Tariq El-Shabazz, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been practicing 30 plus years. Began in the district attorney's office for approximately 5. Then I went to a law firm and was bored out of my mind. Opened my own practice and then did that for about maybe close to 20 years or 20, so more than that. And then Seth Williams was DA, was having little issues and asked me to come on board as the first assistant. And so I left my practice and kind of in the hands of some trusted, fierce attorneys and was in the DA's office for maybe about 9 months when the election was coming around and Seth was no longer going to run. And then I allowed some people to talk me into stepping out and running for office. Something that I learned a lot about politics from, but something that I would never do again. And then after losing to somebody with more money, I opened my practice back up, and now I'm doing straight litigation. Obviously, I do criminal law, criminal defense, but I'm doing a lot more sports and entertainment as well, and some other civil litigation. Actually, I'm doing some civil rights stuff as well. So the shoes are kind of changing a little bit.
So that's why I invited you on today, because your knowledge is so well versed, but specifically what's going on when we're looking at it from the criminal justice aspect. We're looking at things from the civil rights aspect, and we're just trying to navigate these COVID waters. So many questions that come to me about what's going on with cases, with the courts, what's going on with prisoners who are in prison right now and their health and safety, because we're seeing the reports come out. And so I asked you to come on so we could talk about it.
I think that a lot going on. How about that? Let me start there.
Okay, well, let's start talking about the courts, because everybody's very confused about the suspension of the courts. And I've really been trying to explain that there's still court work going on. You can still file things, but that's kind of where it's stuck, unless it's
that is absolutely correct. And there are opportunities for emergency hearings for you to have those hearings. And now they're trying to have hearings similar to how you're conducting your show, so that everybody is not sitting together in the same courtroom. Originally, when in fact the work stop order, if you will, came into place, they were having courts, just weren't having people in the galleys. Unfortunately, people contracted the virus. Some defense attorneys contracted it. There were some court staff that contracted it, and as a result of that, not only did city courts and I should say courts of common pleas shut down, but the federal court system shut down too. And so what they're basically doing is that they're trying to get in touch with attorneys and have them, if at all possible, which is absolutely impossible at this point, get in touch with their clients somehow and see whether or not they can push to certain dates. I mean, I have dates that are starting in August. They're trying to give you as much time as possible. But there's some counties, Chester County, for example. Chester County is allegedly.
Now, please explain that, because people make this mistake all the time. So Chester County is where?
Chester County, Westchester. It's the ritzy part of outside of Philadelphia. How about that one? Right outside of Delaware County. Actually, it borders on Montgomery County. It is a surrounding suburb. I say that is
because, example, people think Chester is in Chester County. So, and I've gotten a lot of questions about those filings. So that's what I meant.
Oh, no, that's a very good distinction. Chester County is Chester is in Delaware County.
Yes.
Chester County is in Westchester. That's considered Chester County. What they are doing, because of the numbers in their particular region, if you will, aren't large numbers. I got a call from court administration talking about whether or not I was going to waive homicide preliminary hearing, and obviously that's not going to occur. It won't ever occur unless they're going to drop the charges. Then I'll waive it today, and they can drop them. But because I wasn't, they're saying that starting next week they are going to schedule a hearing, and I'm going to get short notice. Now that's a joke, because in order for my client to get there, since it is a homicide, he's not on bail, he's in custody. You got to bring him out of Philadelphia into Chester, and they're not transporting prisoners. So that's not going to happen. So unless they're going to do it via TV, and that's going to be a little difficult for me and him too, because I can't consult with him. How am I going to be able to talk with him while at the same time I'm cross-examining those people that are accusing him? So the system is in flux. Everything is on hold. Now, it's important to know that you have an absolute constitutional right to be tried within a certain period of time. It's called the speedy trial rule. That rule
are there any limitations on that?
Absolutely. The limitations are if, in fact, there is excludable, which is a fancy term for saying that you went beyond that 180 days, that 365 days, the amount of time that you were to be tried, but that time is extended because there's a certain amount of time that's excludable. What does that mean? For example, if your attorney was busy in the courtroom somewhere else, if he needed more time to get prepared and you had a particular date, he would ask for, or she would ask for a continuance, and the date between the time in which you were supposed to go to court, say it was on the 13th of April, until the time that the case is listed again, say that it's listed on June 13th, that's called excludable time. So you can't go to the judge and say, Judge, I'm past my time, and you have almost 3 months of time that is excludable because you, as the defendant, asked for time. Then there's extendable time. Extendable time is basically the court has some particular action. For example, this would be extendable time because there's nothing that the court can do to get a case on right now because we're in a pandemic, not an epidemic. I've seen people talk about we're in a pandemic, which is worldwide. Epidemic is not worldwide. So we're in this pandemic. There's no way possible that the court can safely conduct a hearing for the defendant, any witnesses, any participants, whether a defense attorney, prosecutors, to the end of it, judges, court staff, police officers. So they can't do it. It's impossible. That extends the time. You can't now argue that you're keeping me in jail longer than what my constitutional rights allow you to do, because this is not an action that is as a result of something the court did incorrectly, the attorneys did incorrectly, even the defendant did incorrectly. It's kind of like what's happening in the street too. You're kind of getting certain rights, and everybody's talking about their rights, but your rights are being suspended right now, folks. You're in a pandemic. You don't have the same rights you had 5 months ago. Those rights are
We're going to come
suspended.
back to that because, we've talked so much about martial law and so many folks don't understand it. So we're actually going to really talk about what that is, because Tariq was even explaining to me that we're kind of in like a quasi part martial law. It's not martial law, but there's actually some levels to it that have actually been enacted. But one of those very specific things is that the government can limit your movement and activities for the health and safety of the people at large. And we're going to get to that because so many folks actually ask me about what's going on with SEPTA and the new requirements even to ride. And they think that their civil rights are being violated. So that's why when you get the experts in that can, talk about everything across the board, you ask them. But first, I'm going to stop you right here, and we're going to come back to this because Rob Bridgeway actually has a specific question for you, Tariq, which is, can you share information about compassionate release when judges sign off on early releases for prisoners who are nonviolent aging or in an at-risk group? And Rob, I'm going to assume you're talking about in general because we're going to get specifically to the pandemic a little bit later.
Well, if you're talking about specifically, then if you're talking generally, then you answered the question in the question. What happens is because of a certain condition, something most of the time that can't not be helped by the individual, somebody's age, you can't make them younger. Somebody is in a vulnerable group. They have asthmatic, they have high blood pressure, and this virus attacks that particular vulnerability. They can't help that. You're not going to take away their asthma. You can control their high blood pressure, but they still have it, or heart disease, or someone who is non-violent or low risk that really should not have been in there. Probably they probably should have been in some other type of, if it had been confinement, some home confinement or something that effect. A judge has the ability upon a petition and a showing that there are certain factors that makes this person eligible to be compassionately released, if you will, then they can be released. A lot of times, especially I would say in Philadelphia, they wouldn't have a lot of a fight. At least I wouldn't thought they would have that much of a fight because of the concept that the district attorney in Philadelphia has. But a lot of times, these same petitions, when everything is good, you fight for hard in other counties and in federal court, depending on the forum, depending on the judge, depending on the crime, but depending on the sickness. So now, that's what that is. That's not specific to Corona. In fact, it's interesting because I thought early on initially that the entities were going to work together. That is the police, yes, the district attorney, the defense attorneys and defenders association representing a larger population, and the courts to kind of sign off on people and release them from county custody. It seems like they ran into some roadblocks because, believe it or not, folks, there are not a lot of people out there. There are people out there, and most of the people that are out there that want these individuals to be released compassionately are family members, friends, people that know of vulnerabilities that these individuals may have. But there's another
the other thing is that even so, the family knows the vulnerabilities that they have and limitations that they have. A lot of times, even though folks are processed in, depending upon where your paperwork got to, depending upon what stage you got to in the social work process, all of your comorbidities, I guess for no other way to say that, have actually made their way entirely to wherever you are in the system. So when I say that, is that what's happening is some of the petitions I've seen is that we had newly diagnosed mental health issues that had not been yet screened for and things by the prison system. And as we've been seeing, people have actually been committing suicide and committing violent crimes because they can't deal with the stresses of COVID-19, of what's going on out there. Right. They can't deal with the stresses of new issues that we're having in the actual prison population, because we're going to talk about that, where the disease is actually coming from in the prisons and how it's impacting what's going on there. So as a result, what happens? It's the family who try to reach out to, a defender association, the attorney that they may have had. And now what you're learning is we don't have the access to our clients right. that normally we would.
Right.
So what are some of the end arounds?
That's what makes it difficult. What makes it so difficult is we're talking about, again, that term pandemic. We're talking about an illness. We're talking about, and then depending on what side of the coin you fall on, there's some people that think that there's a lot of knowledge about this and it's being withheld. And there's some people that are saying that they don't have knowledge. But what we do know is that it was mishandled poorly. And I'm not saying with respect to from a city standpoint. I'm saying from with respect to a nationalistic standpoint. You had the leader of this country that you guys elected, saying that it was a hoax and not testing people and not doing things. And so we became behind the eight ball. And because we were behind the eight ball, it attacked the general society. Those that are not, since we're talking about incarcerated, those that weren't incarcerated quickly and swiftly with no known cure, with totally ill prepared to deal with any of the matters. And now, how do you deal with that from the standpoint of someone incarcerated? In fact, where would they come? Are they coming out to a household that they have? Do we have to make sure that, because there are people in there that have vulnerabilities that may not have family to come back to? So where would they go? Well, do we in fact, and you have to look at it from this perspective, and I don't mean to indicate, because obviously if somebody's accused of a crime, they're not convicted of it yet. So they're not, if they're accused of being violent, that doesn't mean that they are violent. However, that is a consideration, a public safety consideration that the district attorney has to consider, that the judge has to consider, and that the parties involved have to consider when that person is being released. So it really is a very sad state of affairs, because being accused of shoplifting doesn't mean that you should be incarcerated in a prison where this pandemic is blowing up like hotcakes. But I'm even go further than that. Being accused of a homicide, accused, which you have not been convicted of, it doesn't even say that you should be locked up in a prison where the a pandemic and a virus is affecting, which can take your life. And so it is a very difficult and delicate state of affairs. And the problem is, it's not something that you can do quickly. It's something that takes time.
And unfortunately, we don't have the time.
Right.
So a lot of what's been going on trying to deal with the crisis has been response to emergency after emergency after emergency. You've seen it. This is how this basically is. So first it was, you're fine if you're asymptomatic. Then it's, you can spread it to somebody even if you're asymptomatic. So stay away from everybody. Then it was, well, quarantine just for 14 days, and then you'll be fine. Then it was, well, actually it's 21 days from the time that you actually have a symptom, not just the time that, so every time we turn on the news, they're learning so much about the disease.
Right.
And then it becomes, how do we fight it? And so now you couple that with an entire vulnerable society. And one of the reasons that I wanted to bring Tariq on today, and we're going to actually continue this conversation totally from a social justice standpoint on Monday. And I invite you to come back to talk with the social justice folks as well, if you wouldn't mind. Because what happens is now, we've talked about constantly are the vulnerable populations, our elderly, folks who are sick. But there we have entire forgotten vulnerable populations. We have people who were former drug addicts. Mm-hmm. They, had dependency problems. Situations like this lead to relapse. We've got, the war zone in Kensington going on over there. We can't seem to get those folks off the street. And if they just came off of a hepatitis outbreak. So you can imagine what's going on over there. Then we've got the individuals, we've got the homeless problem, who determined that they were now going to sleep on the trolleys and on the subways and the L's. And what did that lead to? Higher rates of infection on the SEPTA transit workers. So, we've constantly been in a response crisis situation and keep forgetting that there are a whole bunch of society that are undercounted. That's the best way I'm going to put it. Since everybody's worried about their stimulus check. And then what did everybody gets $1,200. Then we realize you don't get $1,200 if you don't have an address. You don't get $1,200 if your income is so low that you didn't have to file taxes. You don't get $1,200 if you're somebody else's dependent because you have a disability or a mental health issue and somebody else actually is responsible for caring for your money. You don't get there were a whole bunch of exclusions to that $1,200, and that became a whole forgotten segment of society. So there's a lot going on. And the other thing, this is a question for you.
The problem is we're ill prepared and we're responding. And if you're ever in a situation when you're responding to crisis, that means that you're behind the 8 ball already and you're trying to play catch up, and we're forever trying to play catch up. I always thought it was interesting that they were talking about having people social distance and having people confined to their home, but nobody even addressed people in prison. I mean, they should have been like all these other individuals. They should have been the first people to be given masks. How about the family members of the prison guards? They're now having to go to work. They can't say they're essential people. They can't call out on, but so many times, unless they're sick and they're legitimately sick. So now they go into the prison and they take back from the prison if they deal with an infected prisoner, for example, or someone in custody, or if it is airborne. Now you're talking about CFCF. It's not like you're opening windows. So everything is being circulated and recirculated. And if it's airborne, is it possible that it's going to be recirculated that way?
They're basically on an airplane. They live on an airplane, circulated air into different areas. And it's not like you can say, well, I'm on cell block C and they're on cell block A, so we're isolated. No, it's circulated throughout the entire population that's in the jail. And we also know, And we also know that one of the other things that they tell us to do now is this. And I'm gonna tell you, ladies out there, I'm talking to the black women right now. Tariq, you can ignore me, but they tell them the wait a minute. They actually said you supposed to shave your beard off now. That was the latest thing. But they done told us to wash our hair every time we come in from outside. So this was the newest thing, that you can have droplets in your hair. So now when y'all see me in the bonnet in the street, just know I ain't coming home to wash my hair, because it's bad enough when I had to take off my wigs on Sunday and they had to teach me how to wash a wig on YouTube. Y'all know I was trying to dock, because I had to look pretty for y'all Monday through Friday. But the point here is I wasn't going to start with this all weekend too. So it's constantly changing and we don't know. But our prisoners can't come in and immediately wash their clothes. They don't have that luxury. If you are incarcerated, you are on the state's time. And that's the other thing. We have to be mindful that our prison population are part of our vulnerable communities that we are responsible for. When we put people in jail or we put them in prison, we accept their custody. No different than if there's a child in foster care. And that's kind of how I make that akin to. And then we have to be mindful that the primary purpose of the criminal justice system is supposed to be justice. It's supposed to be rehabilitative and not punitive. And I say that because so many folks have come back to me over and over again and said, well, the prisoners, they're in there, because they did whatever. Well, first of all, everybody's not in jail because they did whatever. Some people are waiting time. Some people have been wrongfully convicted. So, there's a lot of stories, in the naked city, as they say. So I can't judge that. Okay. That's not it. But I'm going to just rely on what Tariq said. So that means that I, should be exposed to a dangerous, virus and die. That's ridiculous.
Right.
That is ridiculous. And we have to do better. So now what happens? So Governor Wolf just said, we have been talking about it on this show for a couple of weeks now. What about the prisoners? What about constantly Zahira wants to know what's going on with our homeless folks. She asks me every day. And so now we have a response from the governor is that, hey, we're going to let 1,800 people out. Did you hear this?
Yeah, I did. The interesting thing about that? The interesting thing about it is, and I have to take this opportunity to shout out the Defenders Association under the awesome leadership of my girl, Kiera Bradford.
Kiera says hey to you right here.
Yeah, that's my girl, and those individuals that she has working under her charge, along with other volunteers, are doing a tremendous job trying to, doing a tremendous job trying to basically be just and get justice in this very, very difficult situation. What happens is when someone is in custody, or in fact, let's say dealing with someone on a sentence, because that's a little different. There are certain rights that you give up. And that's the thing that people have to understand. That doesn't mean you give up the right to be treated as a human being. No, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you can be exposed to a deadly virus. No, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you should be in jail longer than what is necessary for rehabilitative or even punitive. It doesn't mean that either. But it does mean that there's a certain amount of lack of empathy that society has. And so what the hard workers have been trying to do is make people see that these are individuals, their fathers, their brothers, their mothers, their aunts, their sisters, they are all aspects. And this snapshot of their life for a lot of them is not what represents them. And so you have to first of all, make them human, because there are people that you hear complaints from, unfortunately, say they did something so they should be there. No, they're a human being, and maybe they shouldn't be there. But even if they did something and they should be punished, they should be punitive, they don't deserve to be put into in fact, there's a constitutional right involved. But anyway, we're not going to go in. That's a whole different thing. But they shouldn't be put into a situation where it's cruel and unusual, or they're exposed to that degree. Nor should the people that are fighting very, very hard for their freedom, because unfortunately they're exposed as well. Nor should the people that are going to make sure that the prison is run effectively, they're exposed as well. The people that are bringing food in, people that are dealing with the laundry. The unfortunate part about it, and why it's so important that we deal with releasing people, is because individuals are taking the virus out of the prison. There are people in the prison that may be isolated, but their vulnerability allows them to be at the slightest bit of contagiousness, if I can say that, and
we can make up words,
scientific.
You know,
the slightest bit of that, now they're vulnerable. Someone, for example, that just kept violating probation. In fact, in the last time they violated probation, they took a car. So now they actually are sitting there, and the judge is frustrated. But the judge didn't anticipate the time that they were going to sit for maybe 2 or 3 months that they were going to give them, that it was going to be a coronavirus.
Yes.
Now absolutely. You have that person in there with a crime. I don't want my car stolen. I'm not trying to downplay stealing cars. However, it's a possession. They have somebody stealing a possession. They are vulnerable because they may have been, their immune system is compromised because of their drug addiction, because that compromises immune systems too. The immune system is compromised because and that's a sickness, for example. Alcoholism, a sickness, for example. Someone smoking, and as a result of the smoking, they have a lung disorder. How about somebody that just has an allergy, and because of the allergy, they're vulnerable? We have to look with compassion and humanity towards these individuals as well. And the question is, can we in fact get some type of control over the spread of this virus by allowing those individuals to come out? And I think we can. But I don't want us to get sidetracked. We keep talking about this number, 1,800, 1,800, 1,800. 1,800 is a sip.
Thank you.
In a gallon of water. A sip. A gallon of water.
1,800 is less than 3% of the prison population. So in Pennsylvania, housed in Pennsylvania. And so what's happening is there's also a whole bunch of criteria around who's going to be the 1,800.
Yeah, because those 1,800 people employ other individuals, because you need to have guards and everything in those communities, because it's an industry. But also, this is a very special time, folks. It's called the census.
Don't forget to fill them out.
And the people that are counted in the census are people that live in particular counties. For example, if you're in Schuylkill County Prison, in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, and you are in a rural community, small community, you are counted as part of that population. So if I begin to take hundreds of people from that prison, or hundreds of people from Montgomery County, from Phoenix, New Grattisburg, and start taking hundreds of people, then their census numbers are going to be different. That affects the institution. We talking money, folks. All the things that we talking about as Corona is about money. Half of the stuff is money first, money first, money first, and now you're talking about people on the low end of the totem pole. So these things affect these politicians, and these politicians make some decisions.
But not just that. So we know what our prison population looks like, and we know that almost 70% of the prison population in Pennsylvania actually comes out of Philadelphia County, in the state of Pennsylvania.
You should have let me say that, because I ain't running for office. I can say whatever the hell I want to say.
Okay, so you say that. Y'all didn't hear me. Tariq, say it. Okay.
I said it. The majority from Allegheny County and Philadelphia.
So as a result,
populate the state. Now, if you're going to have these people come back to Philadelphia, our brothers and our sisters that are there, that are in that release program, and they're coming from Philadelphia, they're taken from some of these counties, and these counties survive. That's what prison industrial population is. It was, when you talk about Coal Township, it used to be a township where coal was produced. We don't produce coal no more. So they turned it into a prison town where everybody works in the prison institution some way. When you talk about the steel industry and the steel in Allegheny County, up there when U.S. Steel and Lucan Steel used to be, there are prisons in those places. So all of the people that live in those areas, because they died, those areas died when steel wasn't being produced anymore. They died when coal wasn't being produced anymore. So what you did is you had mandatory minimums, you built all these new prisons, and now you brought that community that was dead, that didn't look like you, back to life. But in order to do that, you took all the people in the community of the people that looked like you, and you arrested them for a little bit of crack and gave them 2 years, or a little bit of crack and gave them 5 years. And I'm a little bit of crack. And I keep saying that because you can have a whole kilo of powder and don't get what you used to get with crack. Anyway, I don't want to do that. We're not going to have an economic discussion about drug distribution, but we are going to understand that these particular institutions that we're trying to say release people from because they're vulnerable need the people in there. And the people that they need in there is the people that we need home, our brothers and sisters that are from Philadelphia. And if they leave that population and come to Philadelphia, the census is going to be affected. The money is going to be affected.
They get counted. So when your loved one come home, make sure you go to census.gov and count everybody in your household because they're in your, but it doesn't matter because guess what else? When they come back, they're not being released to households. So they're taking them out of prison and they're putting them in halfway houses. So that are already understaffed and overcrowded. So this is very interesting. So it's on. So we know we got to sit 1,800, and it's 1,800 statewide. So it's not all 1,800 in Philadelphia County. We just assume that based on the statistics that folks are going to go back to Allegheny County and Philadelphia County. However, then they're going to go back to halfway houses that are also not equipped to deal with the coronavirus. So now
we got houses that are not equipped to deal with coronavirus.
That's true.
Because you're bringing somebody home. Suppose we don't even talk about the economic ability of the person's whose house they're going to, because now you're bringing 1 or 2 more miles in there. So you have to have more food in there. You have to have the ability for them to sleep.
2 quarantines.
Yeah.
There's one for the rich and one for the poor. Isolation is not so easy when you have to go out to work and you have to go out to get food because you can't buy $1,000 worth of groceries at one time. We know that there are definite problems. But Rob Ridgway actually, is a statement. The 13th Amendment ratified in 1865 says, and I know I was like, seriously, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. I think that Rob specifically was responding to the part we were talking about, the fact that they have not been actually convicted of crime at that time.
Rob, there's an exception to that constitutional amendment. I can give you the short version or the long version. The short version,
baby.
The short version right now is that we're in a pandemic. And we're in a quasi martial law process, if you will. And the safety and welfare of the citizenry is top notch, is top priority. And because of that, then those particular rules have exceptions. Those constitutional amendments have exceptions. But let me even get better than that. Let's say we're not into that. And you do have someone who has not been convicted yet, because you can have somebody who gives you a confession, you have them on videotape, you see him shooting 15 people, and you got 10 of the 15 people that can tell you that it was him that shot you. So you have some strong evidence. This person, it was on bail, he went out and shot and killed somebody else. Well, that means that someone can make the argument that this person is a danger to the community. And if that person is a danger to the community, then we also talking about an exception. The other thing is, I think you talked about the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And so the United States Constitution, well, again, I don't want to go into constitutional law. At the end of the day, let me say this to you. That amendment is inapplicable to the circumstance that we're talking about right now. What they were saying was, allegedly, abolishing slavery. And I say that because they haven't abolished slavery. What they were saying, allegedly abolishing slavery, is saying that you can't have slavery anymore. The only time we can lock you up in chains and put you in a prison is if you were convicted of a crime. That was supposed to be the amendment to abolish slavery. So then that's not that I disagree with you. It's that there's reality and there's paper. And there's reality and there's books. There's reality, which is how they apply the law, and then there's the law. And the best example I can give you is Donald Trump. This man has violated 50,000 laws. And it's clear that he violated the laws. And he's never been charged with a crime. And in fact, all of the people that surround him make excuses for him. Or they just literally just lie in front of everybody else's face. But we can find someone, and they say this to us all the time. I want the citizens to respect the law of the country, but the person that is supposed to lead the country don't respect any of the laws of the country. And so you have people showing you that even though there is a law that is in place and someone violated it, it depends on who you are that violated it. Let me just say one other thing, and I'm gonna leave it alone because you got me on the soapbox. There were 4 senators that we're aware of, and I'm only saying that we're aware of because I'm sure it's more than 4 senators that learned in November that in fact this pandemic there was a possibility of this pandemic, and if it came, that stock was going to go down. That's called insider trader information. It's against the law. They went out and traded their stocks. They got rid of their stocks, took all the money from the market that they had in the market based on that information, illegal information. Before the pandemic got this bad, people found out that they used insider information to take the money out the stock. They violated the law. No one has said anything about these guys being locked up. Let me tell you something. Let one of us do that. That's all. Let one of us do that. Let you find out. Let your cousin.
They even sent her to jail, okay?
Listen, let your cousin John, who works for the SEC, find out that General Motors is going to lose some money. So he tells you about it. You got General Motors stock, and you pull your stock out. And let's see where you and John end up. We be talking about releasing y'all because of the coronavirus. So we have to be real, folks. We always talk about wake up. Every time I read something here these days, wake up, stay woke, wake up, wake up, wake up. Well, wake up. There are 2 different Americas. It's been that way forever. There are those laws that apply to us, and there's to the common folk, and there's laws that apply to people that have a little bit of change. And when I say a little bit of change, the rich people. Now, rich people, let me say this, and I use the definition that Shaq uses when I talk about rich. Shaquille O'Neal, somebody called him rich one day. You know what he said? He said, I'm not rich. I work every day. The person who's rich, he's the guy that pays my check. The guy who pays me, that's the guy that's rich. I got to work for this check. So now, in all reality, he's well off. There's no doubt about it. But if you still had to work, you ain't rich. Rich is not having to work anymore. That's my definition of rich. At the end of the day, I know I'm not getting a stimulus check, by the way. I can't understand why I'm not getting stimulus money. I'm losing money too.
Look, wait a minute. Yesterday, Joe Biden said he was going to forgive the student loan debt, but only if you went to public college and only if you only got a college degree. I'm like, well, I don't care. I mean, can somebody get rid of my, because I'm going to tell you, I did real well until it was time to go to law school. Then all of a sudden, somebody said it's going to be $200,000. So can I get some?
Well, so that we're clear, I've been practicing for 30 plus, and I can assure you that I might have paid off my last student loan maybe about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I don't have a problem with it. And I'm gonna tell you why I don't have a problem with it. It was an investment in me. Mm-hmm. So I don't have an issue with that. I have a problem with the interest,
Well, no, the fact that folks have been paying I have so many friends that have been paying for 20 years and they still owe more than they did when they got started because it's compounded daily. It's not just money, it's compounded daily. So
interest is slavery. That's slavery.
Yeah, they got to keep you in the cycle. But I'm just saying, I mean, they giving everybody else something. I can't get a stimulus check. Can I get one of these student loans? Can I get something? I mean, I want something.
Well, Joe gonna say everything you need to say, by the way. And Joe gonna say everything he needs to say. And those individuals that were burning down, they were burning down last time and didn't want to vote because they were burning down. And I'm burning down, so I'm burning down. And if Bernie is not going to win, I'm not going to vote for Hillary because she was part of the complex and all that stuff that she was part of. And they were part of it, no doubt about it. So I'm not going to vote. And Trump is in office. That's all I got to say. So all of those people that did not vote and had an issue because they were Bernie and Bernie wasn't the nominee, don't say nothing about Trump. Y'all should be Trumpers. Because at the end of the day, the devil that you know is always better than the devil that you don't know.
Exactly.
And we know Hillary, we know those Clintons inside and out. Now, mind you, will we get jammed up with the Clintons? Absolutely. You're still going to have some problems. There's no doubt about it. But we wouldn't have the same things that Donald Trump did. The only thing I respect about Donald Trump is he's stupid enough to tell us the truth.
No, but unfortunately, we
No.
still
And
don't
when I
listen.
say that, let me be careful now. When I say that, I'm talking about he don't like us. He tells us that all the time. He gives a damn about the rich, don't give a damn about the poor. He tells you that all the time. He'll break the law and won't give a damn about it and won't get locked up. He tells you that all the time. So that's what I'm saying. He hasn't told the truth about the corona, but he don't know nothing about the corona. He's stupid.
Well, then he walks away and Dr. Fauci takes over.
Yeah, but
And
they getting
Dr.
ready to
Fauci
they getting
does
ready to kick
everything
Dr. Fauci out. See, we went off topic. I apologize.
Yeah, sorry, when the conversation get good, they turn it to kitchen table conversations when
Yeah,
you're
that's my
talking to
I
Tariq. Because,
apologize.
he'll take you all the way there, all over the place.
Well, we're not on the network, so I'm not. They're not beeping me
There you
or
go.
telling me they never put
And
me
that's
on no
that's
more.
that's really, really okay.
You sure your
Um,
campaign manager's gonna say, "Don't get that red bearded man on there no more"? He might cause some problem. He might lose some votes or something.
No, well, this is it. This is where we are. We have to bring people to office that have resources so that we can get things done. That's what we've got to do. You have got to have friends across all walks of life from all different angles who have all kinds of different talents. Because what we've been missing, especially in the 190th, is we've been missing that legislative dirt. We really have that.
Mm.
Unfortunately, a whole bunch of things happened with the seat. We've been unstable in my community for a very long time. We haven't had a piece of legislation that has been sponsored out of my district in a generation. So we are, it's time for us. It's time for us to do some things and to bring all of our talent to bear. And so I'm trying, and mostly right now, I'm really just trying to help my people get through this because the best thing that we can get is some information that's accurate and that we understand, that is accessible to us with some people that we feel like we can find to talk to that speak our language.
Well, let me say this. I didn't hesitate when you asked me to come on, because I knew you prior to this. We ran when I ran for the nomination, Democratic nomination, and I have to laugh every time I say it, for district attorney. You were running for judge, and they did the bait and switch on you, sort of like they did the bait and switch on me. They just really bait and switched me. But at the end of the day, I definitely appreciated what you stood for then, in a crowded field. Your position with was your position. I don't think that you ever strayed away from that. And we traveled a lot together, because we all were at the same forums.
All the
And
time.
what was interesting about it is that listening to somebody have a position, the very first forum that changed forum number 15 when they found out you got more rhythm from the position that you were taking. And so I appreciate that. So I definitely try to stay far away from politics, but I don't stay away from information. So I definitely think that you would make a tremendous, 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 tremendous asset, for our community and the community of West Philadelphia. And I think that some of the changes that people want and they desire, or at least they talk about, can only happen if people like you take that position. Now, she didn't pay me to say this, folks. This was actually something that was done after. But I can't vote. I'm not a full-time Philadelphian. Um,
But I
However,
feel, you know what, Tariq, I really appreciate it because it's coming from an attorney that I've always admired. So, back when before I was even in law school, I was like, what is going on in this courtroom?
you don't
I
have to
want
try to act like you're so much younger than I am. You do that all the time. Before I was in law school, when I was just in elementary school and I saw him, you don't have to do that. We know you're a young lady.
well, you just gotta take the jabs when you can. Gotta take the jabs when you can. I'm young running for the seat. I can't tell nobody my hip hurt every day. That's not good. That's not good. But I've got looking at the time, we got time. We have one more question here, but I really do hope that you can join us for a little bit on just talking about the prison reform on Monday because we've got some solutions and suggestions. But somebody just wanted to know specifically about what to do for folks who were close to release. So, are there any ways to get inmates released in PA and all over who has been convicted but has little time left to serve?
I
And
mean, that those are the people, to be honest with you, that they should be looking to release as well. There could be early parole petitions. I'm presuming that they have reached their minimum. even if they're almost at their minimum. I mean, that's somebody, to be honest with you, I think that can shed light on that is somebody like Keir Bradford Gray, the chief defender. Because I think that these are the type of programs and petitions that her office tries to put forth a lot for a whole host of reasons. I mean, at the end of the day, what's serving 2 more months if you owe 2 more months? When you can get someone out from under this pandemic and get them started, especially if they have the support system and things in place. There are early parole petitions. There are petitions you can make, especially if they're in the county with respect to judges. When in the state and the parole board, that's a little different. I would tell you to work with Josh Shapiro and the parole board, but I understand from some personal experience and under this administration that it's a lot more difficult getting people out in terms of parole type situations. So I would tell you to talk to a lawyer that does that type of work, and that's a skill set. Try to get a early parole petition, and if that person that we're talking about has been doing all of the right things while they were there, they actually completed courses that they needed to, they stayed out of trouble, they don't have to be a model citizen, because I don't know anybody that's a model citizen. There's just people that don't get in the same type of trouble that other people get into. That's the reality of it. I think
sometimes you get in court.
Well, sometimes they do, and sometimes they learn from a little run-in and realize that, listen, I don't want to be sitting in anybody's jail cell. And that was my thing. Disappointing my mom and sitting in somebody's jail cell. Now, I mean, I'm not going to tell you that there might have been things. That's the 2 things. I'll say that.
My daddy always just told me, don't you embarrass me in these streets. That went for a multitude of sins. That was the answer. Don't embarrass me in these streets, okay? And I still live by this, because don't embarrass me in these streets.
There's a lot of ways you can embarrass people in the streets now.
No, that's what I mean. Unfortunately, it carries a multitude of sins. It put me back in my place many times, because sometimes, I'm right on the verge. I'm like, now my papa, he would say, I'm embarrassing him in these streets, so let me sit down. Let me shut up. Let me calm down for a minute, So those things they do, those lessons that your mama and daddy taught you, those the fear of God that Betty Dowdy put in me, and they live on.
No doubt.
But I unfortunately, Miss Stokes, I don't want to mess up your name because everybody always messes up mine. I'm going to ask Tariq for some additional referrals of folks who do those relief, as well as some other criminal defense attorney friends that I have. What I would tell you to do is check back on this link, and we'll put those contact folks there. Hopefully I can even tag them, and so that you can get in contact.
I definitely do. Give me an opportunity. I'll definitely contact some people. I think that also, and you can tell that Keir is actually my friend. So I shout out all the time. The Defenders Association has some referrals if they can't handle it themselves, and they do a lot of that type of work. That they know a network of people that do this type of work. And I would flood, to be honest with you, I would flood the system with these kind of cases under these set of circumstances, because I don't care if we go back to work within the next 2 months, we're not going to get back to normal within the next year.
It'll be a year to 18 months. Because also, one last thing that I actually do want to talk, I want to explain people the hierarchy of cases, because when we talk about this backlog, it becomes really an issue. So when cases, like let's say there's actually a hierarchy of who goes first, what cases are considered most important. So the federal court is at the top. So if you're in the federal court, those cases are the priority. Because don't forget, the other thing that we got to do is we're then going to need jurors to come serve on the jury. Please, if you get a jury selection notice, especially if you look like me or Tariq, please show up. Please, because we're going to need some people that look like us, coming from where we come from, with some similar experiences, so that we can get justice for other people who look like us. So that's one. So then when you go to federal court, criminal cases are going to go first. And then if they are criminal cases of individuals who are in custody, they get a priority because
Right.
you got to move those through the system. So if you're out on bail, you can be out on bail for 2 or 3 years. You're not, it's disrupting your life, but it's not
Right.
taking away your freedoms.
And
Then state
they
court,
take speedy trial serious in federal court.
yes. And I was gonna say in feds, when we call it the rocket docket, when they say you going, you going. So, and then you go to state court, which is what most of us are dealing with, is state court situations. And it's the same thing. The criminal courts are at the top of the list and the civil courts are at the bottom. They're going to try to get in and they're going to try to move these criminal cases with the same things. Anybody who's been in custody is going to really be a priority. But when Tariq just explained to you about time that's been ruled excludable, and he talked about that, things like my attorney's not available and I requested it, believe you me, that there are going to be cases that the time is ruled excludable because of this pandemic. Now, it's coming.
Oh, no. And there are. I mean, there are literally, I can't even tell right now. I lost count. I just stopped. It was getting depressing. Counting the number of cases my cases that have been pushed back, and now they're pushed back into other cases. And the problem is I have cases in August and I have cases that are serious in nature. In other words, homicides are going to take priorities. Federal cases are going to take priorities. Violent offenses that on a state level are going to take priorities. Sexual assaults are going to take priorities. The little car cases, little cases like that, they're not going to take priority. But cases involving victims, real life cases involving victims of serious offenses are going to take priority. And these cases are going to jumble. They're going to run into each other. And we're not even mentioning the fact that people are getting summonses now, which means that the municipal court, which is the lower level of criminal court, is going to be infiltrated with preliminary hearings and infiltrated with misdemeanor crimes. So we're talking about that. And we're talking about police officers now. So if you think they're getting overtime now, wait till this is over. You're going to see how much overtime.
And we have, I think the last count was more than 100 officers who tested positive for COVID. I think that's the number. So that means that our, available officers are being diminished. And now, like there's even do you come and you're still sick, or are you in isolation, and when do you come back? We actually just had our first officer who recovered and actually came back to work yesterday. So that was in the news. So think about this: as the pandemic wears on and now it's time for these cases to go to court, the officers are not going to be available. So now we're going to have a whole nother set of problems trying to get the schedules available. And then if you're like Tariq, and you've got a really busy docket, now what happens? So, because what's going, and I've actually had this happen. I came, off of a 6-week trial, and so everything that was supposed to go during those 6 weeks all got pulled like at the same time. So every single one of those cases then got pushed back. Philadelphia County was great, but Delaware County doesn't have that many judges. That case got pushed a whole year, and I felt really bad for those people.
And they work differently in the counties during the summer. A lot of counties have trial terms, and trial terms means that there are certain periods in time where they're not going to have any trials. You try to fill up a month or so with trials. And busy attorneys can't work from that. We got to work from selected dates, because then you can schedule trials around that date. But if I have to go to a scheduling conference and they're going to tell me they want me to try something the next week, that would be a problem for me and a lot of other people. So it's going to be a rough ride. We're going to feel the effects. We're talking about the effects physically right now, but we're going to feel we're feeling them economically as well. But we're going to feel the economic effects. We're going to feel the effects of mental health and stress that we're feeling now, but even to a greater extent in terms of time that you can't recapture. Everybody was talking about summer vacations. That's kind of hilarious to me, because what kind of vacation you're going to have with everything being pushed back? We're going to be taking December vacations, if a vacation at all. So it's just like school. How about folks, we're in a very, very difficult time now. And it's stressful for everyone else. The criminal system is not immune to what is going to happen in terms of the pure chaos to the way people used to live.
That's why we have attorneys like you to help us through this chaos. We appreciate you for coming on to give us so much information about where we stand with the criminal justice system right now, what we can do for our loved ones in the courts. Always invited back. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I told y'all that Tariq was going to bring the fire. I already told you it was going to be the fire. But you can reach out to him at 215-972-7017. That's 215-972-7017 at El-Shabazz Law. He's down at 2 Penn Center. We're actually in the same building in Center City, 1500 JFK. And whenever, outside opens up, you can
Right.
there. But in the interim, you can give him a call. He'll do a Zoom conference with you as well. Again, Tariq, thank you so much for for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And I told you all that Fridays is Feel Good Friday. And when there's not a lot to feel good about, one of the things that I can feel good about is the fact that there is so much capable talent that we have so much access to that can help us weather this storm. I am Danyl Patterson, candidate for the 190th state rep seat, always reminding you that we will do better together.